Hello, today we're going to talk about finding the range of a function. Now, specifically, we're going to be talking about finding it graphically. Algebraically speaking, it's a little bit harder to do, and we're going to learn some other tricks first before we actually find it algebraically. So, graphically only today, let's first start off by saying, what do we mean when we're talking about range here? So, the range of a function is the set of output values for a function. In this class, we express range of a function using interval notation. So just like before with domain, we're going to use the same thing for range. If you don't know what interval notation is, go back and watch my video on interval notation. And I want to remind you as we write these out, we go from bottom up pretty much with range. So lower numbers to higher numbers. So negative infinity to infinity is the way we list them, just like we do with domain. Sometimes it gets a little tricky with range. So let's look through some of these. And as I go through them, I'm also going to give you the task of finding the domain as well. It's not a bad practice. So as we look at this one right here, we have, this is basically x squared shifted up 2 units. First, the domain. Now, the domain for this, even though it doesn't look like it, the domain goes from negative infinity to infinity. So we're going to write this out as negative infinity to infinity. So the lower numbers all the way out to the bigger numbers. And for the range, remember, we're going to go from bottom up like this. So we're starting right here at positive 2, and we're going to include that 2. So we do a bracket. And then we go up forever, all the way out to infinity and beyond, right? And so this is our range. Remember, with infinity, we do a parentheses because you can't include infinity. It's not a number. So that's it for our first example there. Let's look at number 2 here, our second example. So for this one, starting off with domain, this is the same thing as x cubed, by the way. This goes from negative infinity to infinity. And that's our domain. We're going to go negative infinity to infinity. And the range also goes from negative infinity to infinity. So our possible y values are all real numbers as well. Let's look at number 3 here. We'll learn later on that this is the same thing as y equals the square root of x. As we talk about parent functions, we'll learn that. Starting with domain, notice this goes from 0 out to infinity. You can take the square root of 0, so we're going to include 0, and then we're going to go to positive infinity. Same thing actually for our range as well. Our range does not include any negative numbers. It does include 0 because the square root of 0 is 0, so it's going to start at 0 and go to positive infinity as well. So in these two examples, the domain and the range look exactly the same. That's not always the case, as we saw in the first example, but sometimes it is. Let's look at this one. Number 4 here, this is the same thing as the absolute value of x written like this. I want to get you used to seeing these parent functions and identifying them. So y equals the absolute value of x. Notice the domain goes from negative infinity all the way out to infinity. So we're going to write that as negative infinity to infinity. And then our range starts here at 0 and goes up to positive infinity. So we include the 0 and we go out to positive infinity. All right, let's take a look at number 5 here. So this is the same thing as x squared. Notice it is a parabola, but it's flipped upside down. So we're going to say the negative flips it. And we'll talk more about transformations in a future lesson coming up soon. But once again, just getting you used to identifying the parent function and then seeing what makes it change there. Now our domain still goes from negative infinity to infinity. But this time, our range, notice we're going, and be careful with this. Let me move this so you can see it completely here. Be careful here. Our range goes from bottom up. That's how we want to list it. So many times we look at this and say, well, we're starting at 0 and we're going to negative infinity. Don't think like that. Read the graph from bottom up when you're writing out the range. So the range starts at negative infinity and goes all the way up to 0, and it stops there. All right, so we're reading it from bottom up when we write it out like that. So that's it pretty much for range there. If you have any questions, I want you to let me know. I'm going to give you a ton of practice problems so you can try these out. And if you need more practice, I'll be happy to give you more problems. Okay? Thanks for watching and have a good day.